So, welcome to episode 5 of Warrior. Whiskey and Sticky and all the rest can wait. Right, so let's get into a brief synopsis and then we'll get on to the breakdown of the episode. It opens up with Mai Ling in a cell, young Jun in the back of a wagon, and both of them are rightly confused and scared. Lee Young wants to help Mai Ling, but the council refuse. Buckley has opened up a deportation centre, and in doing so, he's getting rid of the Chinese quicker. Whilst in said deportation centre, young Jun has two surprises, one good and one not so good. As Sam and Hong look for ways to spring young Jun, Lee Young hands over the compromising photo that Mai Ling has on Buckley in order to secure her release. The Secret Service are still going through Chinatown, excuse the pun, like a bull in a china shop, to look for these plates. We see Buckley's more vulnerable side, and we are rewarded with a scene I don't think anybody wanted to see. Though it's lucky for Mai Ling, Buckley just got sticky, as she is able to negotiate her release. Bill finally has enough of overzealous actions of Police Chief Dickhead. Chow concocts a plan with Assam. Speaking of Assam, he manages to secure young Jung release, but at a very great cost. Chow sets up Lee, but is himself screwed over. During the celebrations for young Jun's return, himself and Assam have a very tense conversation. Meanwhile, Atoy once again splits up from Nellie, let's hope for the last time, and Atoy promises Lai that the time for revenge will come, but only when they're both ready. So let's pick up the key moments for me. Mai Ling and young Jung's story through this is really well done, and it follows a very similar path. So, Mai Ling first. It opens up with her being deloused and put into a cell. Meanwhile, the Longzhi Council is meeting because they're losing faith in her. Only Lee Young wants to get her out. Now in this scene, we once again get Pak putting doubts into Lee Young's head. This time with the facts. Mainly about how much she has cost the Tong. And the Tong are wondering, is Lee Young in on it? Because he must have known, right? Except, of course, she hasn't told him. And the Tong are wondering if they would be better off with a leader who serves the Tong rather than a Tong who serves the leader. The Tong must come first. I keep saying it, but I think they're building up to the two old friends fighting each other. To secure her release, Lee Young hands over the pictures of Buckley's Confederate past. This results in Buckley visiting her, and he's all for sending her back to China, but he knows that with her and young Jun in prison, a power vacuum will happen and it will be chaos in Chinatown, where she promises no, it won't be chaos. It'll be war. And she says that she can prevent the war between the Tongs to help his campaign bid and promises to once again crush Hopway once he has won. So a dodgy deal has won her release. Once home, Lee Young warns her about the council and he points out that the only reason she is free is because of him. And he quite rightly tells her once again he can't protect her if she doesn't talk to him. He asks her if she can get the money back and she replies no. And he looks worried and surprised, basically because he didn't realise how reckless she could be. Though I sincerely hope she does go back to Ducktown and pay them a visit. This time as the Mai Ling we have come to know, the ruthless Mai Ling that kills those that get in the way. As Sam later goes to her because he knows she has the connections to release young Jun. Though how she does this isn't explained, at least yet. They have a tender moment where he says he's glad she got out. Now I pondered in last week's review if Assam and Lee Young would have to work together. This didn't happen, of course, but instead we got to see both leaders in a very vulnerable position when they were at the height of their power. Anyway, we get to see brother and sister together, and Assam being humble enough to seek help even at a great cost, as she wants half of their takings and will provide a safe house to let the Hopway print money in their territory. Once again, Lee Young reminds her she made a deal without telling him, but she confides that the Tong can benefit because she should be able to make up the money for the loss. Now this seems very similar to last season when Assam and Young Jun used the Kumite money to pay for their losses. She later asks Lee Young to marry her, and he accepts, but is he happy about this? Moving on to Young Jun, we get him arriving at what is a detention centre, awaiting deportation. And once again, he's very confused as he was expecting prison, and genuinely seems to show fear at first. He gets talking to someone who is all smiles and friendly, with the promise of tobacco, except it's a trap. They are people angry at the Hopway, and this leads to the set piece of the episode. Young Jun is cornered and he immediately goes for his knives, and obviously he doesn't have them. And we get a very well choreographed scene in which Young Jun is having to fight with his fists in the environment. It gives us the chance to see him fight in an environment that is very much out of his control. Even outnumbered, we know with his knives he'd easily win. But once again, this shows his vulnerability. And after a valiant stand, he is overwhelmed and knocked out, just as the bulls run in. Now last week I pondered if this will see the return of Father Jun to get his son out. I was partly right. We are reintroduced to his father, and he tells us his story before saying he's sorry his son got nabbed, but that he's happy to see him, and they become reconciled. Meanwhile, Assam and Hong are thinking of ways to rescue Young Jun. Hong is bouncing ideas off Assam, but quite pragmatically he keeps shooting them down. They've even kidnapped a guard to torture him for info, and still with no joy. This leads Hong to question if Assam even wants to get him out, to which Assam tells him about the time the Tong left him in jail when he got arrested. He tells him they left him there for a good reason. They left him there for the good of the Tong. Yeah, the Tong must come first. After speaking to Chow, he puts the pieces together that Mai Ling has connections to the local government and goes to see her in the hope of getting Young Jun released. He offers to pay her, but she lets him know all about the counterfeiting, in which she agrees to help Young Jun get out, but for a very, very heavy price. That price being half of everything, and the printer being put in Longzhi territory. And he has no option but to agree. With that, Young Jun is released in the nick of time, and we aren't told how at least, but he manages to get his father released as well. Later we get an absolutely belting scene with Young Jun and Assam. Young Jun is obviously not happy about the way he was released, and he almost accuses of Assam of working with his sister against his own Tong. Now Assam snaps back, and that he could have left him to be deported and take the Tong for himself. It's a very good scene, and it's really well acted, and you can both see the anger on both of them. Young Jun is seething, and I've watched this scene numerous times, and it always makes me smile. Some smaller plot points to mention. As I said in my 1 to 3 episodes, I said Bill's attitude was changing, and today he finally had enough, and he packed it in. Or was he fired? I prefer that he walked. He's also reconciled with his wife, and he promises to take a job with her brother. Though let's be honest, I don't think that's going to last, and I think he's going to be looking for Lee. Now, speaking of Chow, he has set Lee up to Happy Jack. He lures Lee to his shop with the offer of information, but once again, wouldn't you know it, it's a trap. And Happy Jack nabs him so he can collect the bounty on his head. But he's still angry at Chow for being given counterfeit money, So he double crosses him and kidnaps him as well. And that's going to be interesting arc. How do these two characters now work together when there's a big basis of mistrust? Going forward, it'll be interesting and fun to see how they develop this. Once again, a lot happened in this episode. Again, it's furthering and setting up stories to come. It's interesting that this episode is both about vulnerability and reconciliation. Myling is in part, at least, reconciled with her Sam, and perhaps Lee Young. And it would seem, and young Jun reconciles with his father, and also Bill with his wife. Will these relationships last? Well, that's part of the fun ride we get to go on with this show. That's all from me. Ta-ta.